Little by little, a lot by a lot, Rachel Feldman had survived law school, 2 pregnancies, a divorce of her own, and 14 years of listening to other people's divorces, which was worse. She had not survived these things through spiritual awakening. She had survived them through caffeine, spite, and an organizational system involving color-coded folders that her paralegal called the rainbow of human suffering. It had been 14 months since the disclosure, since a coalition of world leaders and the Galactic Federation went on every channel at once and said more or less, "We have neighbors, they're friendly, and by the way, the wars are over." It was the biggest announcement in human history, and within a week it felt like weather. The world had not ended. It had just become very strange. Rachel, who dealt professionally in the collapse of things people believed were permanent, found the aftermath oddly familiar. So when her friend Danielle, who had recently quit her job at a PR firm to become, as far as Rachel could tell, unemployed but aligned, insisted she try this bodyworker in North Park. Rachel went, but only because Danielle had also offered to pick up Eli from soccer, and that was worth an hour of nonsense. The bodyworker's name was Marin. She worked out of a converted garage behind a house with too many succulents. There was no website. There was no intake form. There was a table, a candle that smelled like nothing, and Marin, who was tall and blonde and looked like she had been assembled in a country with better health care. "Just lie down," Marin said. "Don't you need to know my medical history?" "No." "Allergies? Injuries? I have a thing with my left shoulder from—" "Just lie down." Rachel lay down. She expected music. There was no music. She expected Marin's hands to do something. Knead, press, crack, whatever bodyworkers did. Instead, Marin placed her hands on Rachel's shoulders and left them there like she was resting them on a shelf. For about 2 minutes, nothing happened. Rachel composed a mental grocery list. She needed lemons. She needed to call the school about Sasha's field trip permission slip. She needed to stop agreeing to things Danielle suggested. Then something shifted. It was not dramatic. It was not a white light or a choir or the opening of a third eye. It was more like, and Rachel would struggle with this description for weeks afterward, more like someone had been holding a door closed her entire life and had just stepped away from it. Not opened it, just stopped holding it shut. She felt loved, not by Marin, not by anyone in particular, not in the way Sean loved her, which was real but grounded in material science, not in the way her children loved her, which was fierce and conditional on snacks. This was love without a sender, love without a return address. Foreign as Sarkisian Baraki, whatever that was. It lasted maybe 40 minutes. She cried for about 30 of them, silently, which was unlike her. Rachel Feldman was not a silent crier. Rachel Feldman, when she cried, which was rare, cried like a person who wanted a resolution. There was no resolution. Marin removed her hands. "That's it," Marin said. Rachel sat up. Her face was wet. Her shoulder felt the same. "What do I owe you?" "Whatever you want." "That's not how transactions work." "Okay," Marin said, in the tone of someone who had been told many things about how transactions work and had found none of them very interesting. Rachel left $60 on the table, which was what she paid for a regular massage and therefore felt defensible. She sat in her car for 10 minutes waiting for something else to happen. A follow-up text, a link to book the next session, an email with a supplement recommendation. Nothing came. Marin did not even appear to have her phone number. She drove home. Sasha was on the couch, watching something on her phone. Eli was building a structure out of couch cushions that would not survive the evening. "How was the thing?" Sasha asked, not looking up. "Fine," Rachel said. She went into the bathroom and looked at her face. She looked exactly the same. She felt like someone had rearranged her internal furniture while she was out and put everything back in almost the right place. Almost. One chair was turned a different direction. She didn't know which one yet. The president had been in office for 4 months and had already broken every rule Rachel understood about power. Her name was Priya Sandoval, and she was 33 years old, and she gave press conferences in sneakers and said things like, "I don't think that's my decision to make," to questions about federal policy, which made CNN anchors look like they were having small strokes on live television. She was the first post-contact president, elected 8 months after the disclosure on a platform that consisted almost entirely of listening to the Federation advisors, to the telepathic children who were appearing in every school district, to the ordinary people who had suddenly discovered that the universe was populated and that most of its inhabitants considered war a developmental disorder, like adolescent acne, that you were expected to outgrow. She had won by a margin that pollsters still couldn't explain. She had no party infrastructure. She had no major donors. She had, as far as anyone could determine, run her campaign primarily through group meditations that were live-streamed on YouTube and attended by 11 million people, which her opponents had mocked right up until the moment they lost by 20 points. What Rachel noticed, and she noticed because noticing was her profession, was that Priya never fought. Someone would attack her in a hearing, call her naive, call her dangerous, call her a puppet of the alien agenda, and Priya would sit there with that terrifying calm and say, "You might be right." Not sarcastically. She meant it. And somehow the attacker would deflate, because you cannot win a fight against a person who has genuinely considered the possibility that you are correct. Within 3 months, it became clear that Priya Sandoval wasn't restructuring the government. She was narrating a decomposition that was already underway. The pretense was gone. Once everybody could see the whole machine plainly, the federal apparatus kept grinding on inertia, but the decisions migrated downward on their own. Priya didn't push them. She just stopped insisting they flow through Washington. When governors called in panic, she asked what the locals thought. When agencies requested guidance, she asked what made sense on the ground. She stayed at the wheel, but the road was changing underneath her, and she had the sense to steer lightly. Fox News called her a puppet. She kept showing up. Rachel's neighborhood in Normal Heights felt it in stages. First, the HOA received a letter from the city, not a directive, more like a suggestion with funding attached, asking if they'd like to organize a neighborhood resource circle. Nobody knew what a resource circle was. Doug Haskell, the retired Marine 3 doors down, said it sounded like communism. His wife Patty said it sounded like book club, but worse. They held the first meeting anyway, because there was a small grant involved, and the neighborhood had been arguing about a dead tree on Meade Avenue for 2 years, and maybe this would resolve it. It did not resolve it. What happened instead was that 14 people sat in Patty Haskell's backyard and talked over each other for an hour. The dead tree on Meade came up. Doug said, "I know a man." That was all. In Normal Heights, Doug knowing a man was the same as the thing being done. Terrence said his car had been dead since October. Kowalski, who had come to San Diego from Krakow in a year he no longer mentioned, said, "I will come look. I am not making promises. I am too old for promises. But I have hands, and the car has an engine, and between us maybe we find something." A girl with tattoos and piercings said, "I need help picking up my daughter from Monroe. Free tattoo for anyone." A woman in a ponytail said, "I want the tattoo, but I don't drive. I cook. 4 lunches? Deal." A man in a polo shirt said, "Tattoos look like bruises after a few years. I would never make one, but I could help sometimes. Let me know." A woman in yoga pants said, "I also drive to Monroe. Same time. We could pool and alternate." A well-dressed older gentleman in the back looked up. "Did someone say pool? I need the pool cleaned." Rachel sat there watching problems dissolve faster than they could form. No forms, no intake process, no color-coded folders. Just people who had been living 30 feet from each other for years, finally talking. She hated it. She hated it because it worked. People started knocking on doors. Not texting first, not calling, just showing up, the way Rachel dimly remembered people doing when she was a child, before the phone became the anteroom to every human interaction. The first time someone knocked without warning, she assumed it was a delivery. It was the woman from 2 houses down holding a plate of something, wanting to know if Rachel's family ate eggplant. They did. The woman stayed for 20 minutes. Nobody had scheduled this. Then the hugs came back. Not the performative kind, the side hugs and air kisses of people who touched without meaning it. Actual hugs, where you could feel the other person's breathing. Rachel was not a hugger. She endured the first several with the rigid posture of someone being frisked. But somewhere around the fifth or sixth, she noticed that her arms had started participating without consulting her. And she filed this under the growing category of things her body was doing that her mind had not approved. And people stopped saying fine. Rachel noticed this at the market, at school pickup, at the circle. Someone would ask, "How are you?" And instead of the usual nothing answer, people would actually say, "Tired, scared, better than last week, missing my sister, happy for no reason." It was like an entire city had collectively forgotten the script, and what was underneath the script turned out to be not chaos, but just people, wanting to be known. What Rachel saw from her street was simpler. Everything got cheaper, not because the city emptied, but because the lie ended. The property speculation that had made San Diego unlivable, the investment purchases, the empty units held for appreciation, the entire financial architecture that turned houses into assets instead of places to live. All of it was suddenly illegal, or taxed into irrelevance, or both. Rents dropped to what they would have been if nobody had ever treated a roof as a stock ticker. Rachel, who had watched clients destroy their marriages over mortgage stress, found this satisfying in a way she didn't fully examine. She owned her house. She had bought it 11 years ago with the proceeds of being very good at divorce, and now it was worth less on paper and more in practice because every room had someone in it. The city taxed empty bedrooms and paid credits for full ones, and the AI platforms, there were a dozen of them, competing and cooperating the way all the new platforms did, matched her with tenants faster than she could change the sheets. A kid from Minnesota who designed AI systems for businesses and spent all day talking into his AR glasses from a hammock in the backyard. A couple from Montreal in the back bedroom. The house was full and loud and smelled like other people's cooking, and Rachel expected to hate it and didn't. San Diego had always been a place people wanted to be. Now that you could work from anywhere and a room cost what a room should cost, they came. The streets were louder than before, more languages, more cooking smells drifting from open windows, more somebody's music at 10 in the morning. It felt less like a suburb and more like a city that had finally admitted it was one. On Rachel's block, a man named Gene, retired, formerly something in finance, now apparently something in chickens, kept a backyard coop and sold eggs and hot food from a folding table most mornings. His rooster woke up Doug Haskell at 5 every day, which Doug reported like a war correspondent filing from the front. Gene's lentil soup tasted like something your grandmother would have made if your grandmother had managed a hedge fund and then quit to live among poultry, which is to say it tasted like rage and garlic and an unexpected amount of cumin. Rachel ate there on a Tuesday and came back Wednesday. She came back Thursday. By Friday she had a usual spot, the plastic chair with the wobbly leg, next to a tarot card reader and a teenager doing something with AR glasses that involved waving his hands like he was conducting an invisible orchestra, which for all Rachel knew he was. "Gene, do you have a food handler's permit?" "I have Marisol," Gene said. Marisol was the woman in the green cap who wandered the block every morning tasting everything. She argued with her hat, laughed, told people their cutting boards were disgusting, taught them how to clean, and ate more food in a day than Rachel ate in a week. "How do you stay thin?" Rachel asked her once. I walk so much. From one cart to another. It's the only way." She took another bite of Gene's rice. "Try the Finnish cart on 36th, vegetarian. Mushrooms in white sauce. And if you want extra, compliment their sauna." The old system had been a man with a clipboard once a year. Rachel had once represented a restaurant owner whose inspector could be persuaded with cash. The cash had been cheaper than the lawyer, which Rachel tried not to think about. "More rice?" Gene said. "I'm fine," Rachel said, and held out her plate. It had been a dry year, and then in October it started raining, and kept raining. Not constantly. There was sun, plenty of it. The gardens needed sun. But the rain kept coming back, 2 or 3 times a week, warm and unhurried, as if it had been waiting somewhere and had finally been invited. The hills behind Mission Valley turned green in a way Rachel had not seen before. The drainage ditches, which had been decorative for most of her time in San Diego, had water in them. Eli thought this was the best thing that had ever happened. Sasha came home from school one day and said, "The kids call them water benders." "Call who?" "The people who make the rain come, like in Korra." Rachel waited for more information. Sasha did not provide more information. Sasha was 12 and considered explanation a form of weakness. It rained again that night, and Rachel stood on the porch and listened to it hit the new garden beds that Sean had built, and the chickens next door making small, annoyed sounds. And she thought about a Russian novel she'd read in college where the rain never stopped, and the children were happy about it, and the adults couldn't understand why. And she went inside and didn't look it up because she wasn't ready to find out what it meant. The golf courses went first, then the decorative lawns, the median strips, the corporate campuses with their performative grass. The city offered conversion grants, and the AI matched willing hands to available soil. Eggs from backyard chickens that wandered the streets like they owned them, which increasingly they did. The sound of roosters in Normal Heights at 5 in the morning, which Doug Haskell complained about for 1 week and then stopped complaining about, which was how you knew something had become permanent. Sasha was the one who scared her, not Eli. Eli was 8, and 8-year-olds absorb new realities the way they absorb everything, without categories. When Eli started telling strangers at Vaughn's that he loved them, Rachel was embarrassed, but it was the kind of embarrassment she understood. Children say inappropriate things. You apologize. You move on. The fact that the strangers, a woman buying paper towels, a stock clerk with acne, an elderly man comparing 2 identical cans of beans, all looked like they'd been struck by something, like they needed to sit down, like Eli had said the one thing they'd been waiting to hear from anyone for years. That part Rachel filed under deal with later. Sasha was different. Sasha was 12, and 12-year-olds do not absorb. They evaluate. They judge. They are, in Rachel's professional experience, the most ruthless attorneys on the planet, arguing cases they don't fully understand with a conviction that would shame the Supreme Court. Sasha came home from school one Tuesday in October and said there was a new kid in her class who didn't talk much but juggled lemons with his eyes closed. "And Ms. Hernandez is in love with someone." "How do you know?" "She was teaching the Missouri Compromise. I felt it in my stomach. Butterflies. But wrong butterflies. Someone else's butterflies. Maybe she just likes the Missouri Compromise." "Mom." The school district had sent a letter home about this. A carefully worded, slightly panicked letter explaining that certain children were demonstrating increased perceptivity and that parents should create supportive environments for open discussion, which was bureaucratic for, "We have no idea what to do either." "Okay," Rachel said. "Okay? I don't know what to do with what you just told me, but okay." Sasha looked at her with an expression Rachel had never seen on her daughter's face. Not the usual 12-year-old contempt, not the performative eye roll, but something like relief, as if she had expected to be argued out of her own experience and was surprised to find the door unlocked. Sean handled it all the way. Sean handled everything, which was by building something. Sean was a construction manager who thought in materials. When he was stressed, he measured things. When he was sad, he grouted. When the world began shifting in ways that couldn't be measured or grouted, he built a chicken coop in Rachel's backyard without asking, which was either an act of love or a territorial claim. And Rachel, who was trained to distinguish between the two, genuinely could not tell. "We don't have chickens," she said, watching him from the kitchen window. "You might," he said. "I kill succulents, Sean. Succulents are designed to survive neglect, and I have exceeded their expectations. I am not ready for livestock." He kept building. He was like that. He didn't argue with words. He argued with lumber. His buddy Marco from the old crew had gotten hired onto the 805 tunnel project, one of the big ones, Raytheon's Pivot, boring the highway underground so the surface could go back to being land. It would take years. The defense contractors loved it. Same scale, same machines, same crews who were used to working on things too large to see the edges of. Except now the thing was a road, not a weapons system. And Marco said morale was the best he'd seen in 20 years of government work. Rachel didn't need the tunnel to notice that the streets were getting quiet. Nobody was commuting. Sean's crew worked 4 blocks from home. Janet's 6 gigs were all within biking distance. The 8:05 at rush hour had thinned to something almost reasonable, and the surface streets were thinning faster than that, because when your life is local, there's not much reason to drive. The city had started converting empty lanes to bike paths, and Europeans who'd arrived with their bicycles and their opinions about walkability were using them immediately, as if they'd been waiting for America to come to its senses. Sean's company had split. Not failed. Split, the way a cell divides. The city had made it almost inevitable. Tax breaks for businesses under 20 employees, scaled penalties for those over 100, and matching grants for any new small operation that registered locally. Sean's crew of 6 got matched to projects every Monday morning. He worked 4 days a week now. He said it was the same amount of building and half the amount of meetings, which he considered the greatest technological achievement in human history. The co-op sat empty for a week. Then Eli came home from Jean's table carrying a cardboard box with 6 fertilized eggs bedded in a dish towel and announced that he was going to hatch chickens. Jean says you just need a warm box in 21 days. Jean is a retired finance person who lives among poultry. Jean is not a role model. Jean says I can do it. Jean doesn't pay our electricity bill. Eli built an incubator out of a cardboard box, a desk lamp, and a thermometer he borrowed from the Matus. He checked the temperature 4 times a day. He turned the eggs by hand because Jean said you had to. On day 19, he stopped sleeping properly. On day 21, 3 of the 6 eggs hatched, and Eli held the first chick in his cupped hands and looked at Rachel with an expression she recognized from Marin's garage. The face of a person who has just discovered that the world makes things without being asked. Sasha, who was going through a phase of wearing only plain clothes because apparently that was what everyone at school was doing now. No logos, no brands, just fabric, as if the entire 7th grade had joined a very understated cult. Sasha watched from the back step and said nothing, which for Sasha was the highest form of approval. The second time she went to Marin, she didn't tell anyone. She drove to North Park on a Thursday afternoon when she should have been reviewing a custody filing and parked behind the house with the succulents and knocked on the garage door. "Back," Marin said. Not a question. "I have a lot of questions." "Okay. Like, what is this? What are you doing? Is it energy work? Is it Reiki? Is it some kind of—" "Lie down." Rachel lay down. This time she didn't make a grocery list. This time she dropped almost immediately into that place, the door not being held shut place. And for maybe 5 minutes, she was not Rachel Feldman, attorney at law, mother of 2, girlfriend of a man who expressed emotion through carpentry. She was just a thing that was alive. Not even a thing. Just alive. And then, for no reason she could name, she felt it. A wave of something that was either love, or the memory of love, or something she didn't have a word for, directed at no one, arriving from nowhere, gone before she could examine it. She lay there afterward thinking that if she told anyone about this, they would recommend a neurologist. She left them anyway. The feelings. She left them on the table in Marin's garage, like dry cleaning she wasn't ready to pick up. Part of the alive thing that included the table and Marin's hands and the garage and the succulents and, insanely, Jean's chickens 2 miles away, and Doug Haskell cleaning his gutters, and Sasha sitting in class feeling someone else's butterflies, and Eli telling a stranger in a grocery store that he loved them and meaning it completely. It lasted 5 minutes. Maybe less. Then she was back in her body, on the table, with a runny nose and a sense that she had been shown something she would spend years learning how to keep. "Marin." Why doesn't this go anywhere? Why isn't there a next step?" Marin removed her hands. She appeared to think about this, or perhaps she didn't need to think about it and was simply being polite to the concept of thinking. "Where would it go?" Marin said. Rachel sat in her car again afterward. She left $60 on the table again. Same amount. She didn't know why she was paying the same for something that had been completely different. But round numbers felt defensible, and Rachel was a person who needed things to be defensible. The strange part was that it followed her home. Not every day, not reliably, but at odd moments. Stuck in traffic, washing a pan, standing in the checkout at Vaughn's. She'd get hit by a wave of something she could only describe as love, except it had no object and no cause. The first time it happened in public, she thought she was having a medical event. By the third time, she just let it pass through her and went on buying groceries with wet eyes, and the stock clerk pretended not to notice, or maybe noticed and understood, because lately everyone seemed to be pretending less about everything. There was no follow-up text. There was never a follow-up text. The thing about the new economy was that it made no sense until it did. Rachel's practice didn't collapse overnight. It drained the way a bathtub drains, slowly, with a sound you ignore until the water is gone. Her practice wobbled like a kid on a unicycle, clients vanishing, billable hours collapsing, the whole structure of 14 years tilting sideways. Fewer clients called. The ones who did were different. They didn't want to destroy their spouse anymore. They came in and said things like, "We don't work together, but I don't want to hurt her." And Rachel, whose entire skill set was built on the assumption that both parties would lie strategically, found herself sitting across from people who were just telling the truth, badly, awkwardly, the way you tell the truth when you've recently started and haven't developed technique yet. The Sarkeesians ran a cafe on El Cajon Boulevard, 22 years married. They sat at Rachel's kitchen table like two people who had been arguing in the car and were now arguing about whether they had been arguing. "We have a business problem," he said. "It's not a business problem. It affects the business." "Everything affects the business. That doesn't make it a business problem." Rachel said, "What kind of business?" "Cafe, bakery, she makes pastries. I make coffee. We argue. People come to watch." "They don't come to watch." "They come a little to watch." Mrs. Sarkeesian turned to Rachel. "He thinks the customers come for the drama. The customers come for the baraki." "What's baraki?" "You don't know baraki?" Mr. Sarkeesian looked personally wounded. "Little packages, with meat, but she makes them with—" "This isn't about baraki," Mrs. Sarkeesian said. "You brought up baraki. To make a point." "What point?" "That you don't listen." "I listen. I listen all the time now. That's the problem." The kitchen went quiet. Outside, an ice cream truck playing something old. "She looked at a plumber," he said. "He looked at every woman who came into the cafe since June." "It wasn't how you looked. It was what I felt when you looked." "You felt me feeling it?" "I want you to say it." "No." Rachel said, "You feel each other now." They looked at her the way you look at someone who has named the thing you were circling. "Since October," he said. "Not thoughts. She's in the back with the dough. I'm in the front with the machine, and suddenly—" He moved his hand over his chest, a gesture that meant something in Armenian and nothing in English. "We know," Mrs. Sarkeesian said. "Both of us. The things you used to keep." Rachel said, "And?" "In 22 years I had rooms she couldn't enter. Now the doors are open," his wife said. "We walk through each other's houses." The ice cream truck came back around. Rachel realized the song was Careless Whisper. She wondered if the driver knew. "So you both look at other people," she said. "You both always did. Now you both know it. What changed?" "What changed is—" He stopped, started again. "What changed?" Mrs. Sarkeesian was looking at the table. "I thought it was mine. What he felt. I thought I had some kind of—" "Rights. Not rights. Something else. Ownership. Don't say ownership. We're not property." "Then what?" She didn't answer. The ice cream truck faded. In the silence, Rachel heard her own refrigerator humming, a sound she usually didn't notice. "Do you want her to be different?" Rachel asked him. He looked at his wife. A long look. "I want it to not hurt." "That's not the same question." "I know." Mrs. Sarkeesian said, "I see everyone. You understand? Everyone. The plumber, the man who delivers flour, the woman who came in Tuesday with the—" She waved her hand. "And I still come home. Every day I still come home. That's supposed to make me feel better?" "It's supposed to make you feel true." He made a sound that might have been a laugh. "True. She wants me to feel true." You don't want true? I don't know what I want. I had a wife for 22 years. Now I have a... He searched for the word. A witness. I was always a witness. But now I know it. Rachel said nothing. There was nothing to add. They sat in the quiet kitchen with Careless Whisper gone, and the refrigerator humming and the afternoon light coming through the window at the angle it comes through in late autumn, when the sun is already thinking about leaving. Mr. Sarkisian put his hand on the table, palm up, not reaching, just there. His wife looked at it for a moment. Then she put her hand next to his, not touching, just close. "This is what we have now," she said. This. When they left, Mrs. Sarkisian stopped at the door. "Come to the cafe. You and your family. Whenever." "The baraki," Mr. Sarkisian said. "You should try the baraki." She had said maybe 10 words in an hour, and it was the best work she had done all year. Doug Haskell set up a folding table at the market with a clipboard and a handwritten sign that said, "Repairs." He had been a Marine for 30 years and a retiree for 2, and retirement had not agreed with him the way the Marines had, which is to say he needed someone to give orders to, and the universe had finally provided. You told Doug what was broken. Doug wrote it down in handwriting that could survive a court-martial. By afternoon, he had dispatched 2 kids on bicycles to your house, one who could fix a washing machine and one who could not but was learning, which Doug considered equally important. He ran the operation the way a man runs an operation when he has been trained to move 4,000 Marines across a desert and has been given, instead, a neighborhood with leaky faucets. The list grew. Washing machines, dryers, dishwashers, water heaters, AC units that had opinions about the weather, plumbing that had been installed by someone who believed in gravity but not in planning. Locks and security cameras because more people in the neighborhood meant more strangers, and Doug understood strangers the way he understood everything, as a logistics problem with a solution. Bicycles were the biggest business. Half the city was on bicycles now, and half of those bicycles were held together by optimism. Doug had a kid named Marco, not Sean's Marco, a different Marco. San Diego had many Marcos, who could fix a bicycle the way some people play piano with his eyes half closed and a look of mild irritation at how easy it was. Doug accepted payment in whatever people had, mostly eggs. He had so many eggs that his refrigerator looked like a protest against cholesterol. The markets on Adams Avenue started in November. Not official markets. Someone put a table out with a pot of beans and a stack of plates, and then someone else put a table out. And within 2 weeks, the stretch between 35th and the boulevard looked like a street fair that had escaped from a country with better food and worse zoning laws. Jean was there with eggs and soup, obviously. A woman from Kensington fried plantains in a skillet the size of a shield. A man from Oaxaca sold tamales wrapped in banana leaves and did not speak to anyone, which only increased demand. An accordion player had set up between the tamale man and Doug's repair desk and was playing something that was either French or heartbroken, or both. A kid in AR glasses sat on the curb designing something in the air with his fingers, pausing occasionally to eat a plantain. 2 women from a circus troupe that had arrived from Portugal last month were practicing handstands against the wall of the laundromat, which nobody found unusual, because nothing was unusual anymore. A woman named Janet, who Rachel knew from school pickup, had somehow become the person who held everything together without holding anything at all. She kept books for Jean and coordinated Doug's repair kids and tutored math and organized elderly care deliveries in Kensington, and she moved through the market the way certain women move through churches, touching things lightly, adjusting what needed adjusting, present everywhere, and in charge of nothing. One Saturday, Rachel watched Janet standing between the tamale man and the accordion player with her eyes closed for maybe 15 seconds. And when she opened them, the accordion player changed keys, and the tamale man flipped 3 in a row without looking, and a gust of wind came through that smelled like jasmine from a plant that wasn't there. Rachel looked around to see if anyone else had noticed. Nobody had, or everybody had. It was getting hard to tell. "Janet, what do you actually do?" Janet considered this. "I show up," she said. "Things arrange themselves." It came again while she was standing there. That wave, the one from Marin's table, except she wasn't on Marin's table. She was standing in a parking lot that had become a market. A warmth that started behind her sternum and spread outward and had no object and no explanation and lasted a few seconds. She looked down at the plate of plantains in her hand, as if it might be responsible. Rachel was walking home from the market on a Saturday when she passed a woman in a lime green cap and a green badge on a lanyard, pulling a rolling suitcase and arguing with no one visible. "No, that's stupid," the woman said to the air. Then she laughed. "Okay, fine. But I'm bringing them the long way so the kids can see the park first." She tapped the tiny camera on her cap brim and shook her head. "Moving someone in?" Rachel asked. "Family from Guatemala. 3 kids. Room on 36th is all set, but the little one fell asleep in the car, so I'm bringing the bags first. The hat wants me on 2 other things already." She rolled her eyes upward at the cap. "It can wait." Rachel watched her go, dragging the suitcase up the hill in the afternoon heat, still muttering at her hat. The neighborhood called them elves, former defense and security workers in bright caps, bickering with an AI that tried to coordinate them and often got argued down. They'd been showing up since October, and by now Rachel was used to the sound of someone on the sidewalk laughing at nothing and then explaining to a camera that, no, she was going to do it her way. Sasha came home one afternoon and said she wanted to stop eating meat. "Why?" Rachel asked. "If you gave someone milk every day and then they ate you, would you think that was fair?" "And chickens?" "Eggs are different. The chickens are happy. It's a trade." That night she made pasta with eggs from Eli's chickens and whatever Sean brought, which was bread he had baked, dense as a construction material, which Rachel suspected was not a coincidence. They ate in the backyard. Sasha sat on the ground. Eli talked about a boy at school who could feel the weather before it changed, which Eli reported with the same tone he used for interesting bugs. Rachel passed the pasta and it came again. The wave. Another one. It sat in her chest like a second heartbeat, stayed just a bit, and left without saying goodbye. Sasha said the tall green one taught biology in silence today, the way she might say it was cloudy. Eli said the chickens were quiet this morning too. Then they argued about whether Sasha's egg prices were fair, because Eli said 2 for $1 was too high when you could get them from the green caps for free. The wave faded the way light fades from birch trees when a cloud passes, not gone, just elsewhere. She was not in love with anyone. Sasha asked if there was parmesan. There was. It is what it is, Rachel thought, and didn't even know what she meant by it, and didn't need to. The president gave a speech in December that nobody could agree about afterward. It was short. Priya Sandoval stood at a podium in the House chamber, in sneakers and a blazer, and said something that Rachel replayed 4 times on her phone that evening, sitting in her car in the driveway because she didn't want the kids to see her crying again. What Priya said, or what Rachel heard, was, the system ran on pretending. The pretending stopped, and now everything that was held together by lies was coming apart. And this was not a disaster, this was a diagnosis, and the patient was already healing. She said it better than that. She said it the way she said everything, quietly, as if the truth were not something you raised your voice for. What is happening is not a collapse. It is a transition. Power is moving to where it belongs, to your towns, your streets, your families. I am here to make sure nothing breaks while it moves. That is my job. Not forever. Just now. She paused. And your children are not in transition. Your children are already home. Then she said, and now I have a message for the children. She closed her eyes. She placed her palms over her ears. She stood like that, at the podium, in the House chamber, on every screen in the country, in silence. 3 seconds. 5. 7. The cameras kept rolling. Nobody cut the feed. Eli was eating when it happened. He put down his fork, closed his eyes, and pressed his palms to his ears. Rachel watched him from across the table and said nothing, because by now she had learned that saying nothing was sometimes the only intelligent response. He was still for a few seconds. Then he laughed. Every parent Rachel spoke to in the following days had a version. Their child had stopped, gone still, covered their ears, and laughed. When Rachel asked Eli what Priya had said, he told her in the plain voice of a child reporting a fact. She said, "It is what it is. Green Tara is coming home and bringing silence." "And why did you laugh?" He looked at her as if she had asked why water was wet. "That's how she talks. Green Tara. She talks in laughing." Rachel did not talk about money the way she used to. She used to talk about money the way lawyers talk about money, which is with confidence and the quiet faith that civilization would always need someone to divide its property. 4 clients a week had been comfortable, then 3, then 2, and one of them wanted to pay in installments, and the other one wept for 40 minutes and then said she had decided not to get divorced after all because her husband had started cooking and she hadn't known he could. And what else didn't she know? And maybe that was worth finding out. The office sat empty 3 days a week. Rachel drove there anyway for a while, the way a trapper keeps checking a line after the animals have moved on. She sat at her desk and drank coffee and read contracts that nobody had sent her. And finally, one Tuesday, she looked out the window at the parking lot, and the parking lot looked back, and neither of them had anything to say. She moved her practice to the kitchen table that afternoon. Sasha said it was embarrassing. Eli said the chickens didn't judge her. A rooster crowed from the backyard as if to confirm this. The numbers saved her before the feelings did. Rent on the house had dropped to something a person could say out loud without laughing. The Metas paid on time. The couple from Montreal paid on time. The kid from Minnesota paid on time and also fixed the kitchen faucet without being asked, which Rachel considered a form of poetry. Her expenses had collapsed faster than her income, and one evening she sat at the kitchen table with a calculator and discovered that she was fine. Not prosperous. Not secure in the way she had been secure when security meant a number with commas. But fine the way a boat is fine when it stops taking on water, and you notice the leak has been there so long you forgot what dry felt like. She told Marin this during a session, lying on the table in the garage, and Marin said nothing, which was Marin's way of saying everything. Rachel paid Marin in money because Rachel was a lawyer, and lawyers paid in money. The amounts meant less each month because money meant less each month, which was either economics or philosophy, and Rachel preferred economics. One afternoon after a session, Marin walked Rachel to the door and then stopped and bent down and picked up a piece of gravel from the driveway, gray-blue with a few pink spots, and placed it in Rachel's palm and closed Rachel's fingers around it with both of hers and held them there. A fire truck went past on Adams with its siren going. A dog barked somewhere. 2 feral parrots, the ones that had no business being in San Diego but were, flew over screaming about something only parrots understood. And then everything went quiet. Not gradually. All at once, the way a theater goes dark. For a moment the whole street held its breath. Then it came back. The dog, the traffic, the parrots. Marin let go of Rachel's hands. Rachel looked down at the gravel in her palm, and it was warm. She drove home, and the light hit the windshield at the exact angle that puts a rainbow across your dashboard, the cheap kind, the physics kind. And Rachel sat in her driveway looking at it until Eli knocked on the window and said his new chicken had laid an egg, gray-blue with pink spots, and do you think dolphins like walnuts with cinnamon? Sasha, who was going through a phase of wearing only plain clothes because apparently that was what everyone at school was doing now. No logos, no brands, just fabric, as if the entire 7th grade had joined a very understated cult. Sasha watched from the back step and said nothing, which for Sasha was the highest form of approval. The Metas arrived in January, Vikram and Preeti, 2 kids under 5, from Hyderabad by way of Phoenix. Rachel had sub-rented Sasha's old playroom because everyone was sub-renting now, and the city credits made it almost stupid not to. The first week Rachel heard them through the wall. Not words, just the sounds of a family being a family. Cooking sounds, laughing, a child crying briefly and being comforted, something that might have been a prayer or might have been a song. She had spent 20 years listening to families describe themselves in her office, under oath, in the worst possible light. She had never heard one through a wall before. It was different. It was like the difference between reading about the ocean and hearing it at night from a bedroom window. Preeti appeared in the kitchen at 6 most evenings and started cooking. Rachel was already there. They didn't arrange it. They didn't discuss it. Preeti made dal and rice and things Rachel couldn't name that smelled like cumin and mustard seeds and something sweet underneath. Rachel made pasta. They moved around each other the way two people move in a kitchen when they've done it long enough to stop thinking about it. Except they hadn't done it long enough. It just happened. The way everything seemed to just happen now. Rachel had never had a friendship like this. Her friendships had start times and end times. Lunch at 12, coffee at 3, drinks on Friday. Preeti just was there. After a month, it was the most honest relationship Rachel had besides Marin, and she had never once scheduled it. By February, Preeti's daughter Anvi had decided that Rachel was her second mother. She was 4. She did not understand property lines. She appeared in Rachel's kitchen doorway at unpredictable intervals to report on important matters: a caterpillar, a cloud, the fact that one of Eli's chickens had followed her across the yard, and now they were best friends and played hide-and-seek. Rachel, who had spent her career drawing lines, this asset here, that asset there, yours, mine, the courts, watched a 4-year-old walk through her house as if walls were suggestions and ownership was a game adults played for reasons Anvi had not yet discovered. Eli's chickens were Anvi's chickens. Rachel's kitchen was Anvi's kitchen. The backyard belonged to whoever was in it. Rachel wanted to explain property to her and then realized she would have to explain property to her, which meant she would have to explain property, which was getting harder to do with a straight face. She wasn't a therapist. She wasn't a counselor. She didn't have a title for what she did, which bothered her for about 2 weeks until she realized that the absence of a title was the point. People came and sat at her table and said what was wrong in their family, and Rachel listened the way Marin had listened, not with answers, but with the kind of attention that makes answers unnecessary. She caught what they needed without looking, like a juggler catching lemons with her eyes closed. Sometimes she said something. Usually she didn't. The families that came to her stopped breaking apart at the rate they used to. Not because Rachel fixed them, but because sitting in her kitchen, in the presence of whatever was flowing through her now, and she had stopped trying to name it, people could feel their own love for each other, the way you can feel the sun on your arm when someone moves the umbrella. She told Sean about this one night in bed, in the dark, because important things are easier to say when you can't see the other person's face. I think I'm just conducting something, like a wire. It goes through me, but it's not mine. Sean was quiet for a while. Then he said, "That's how I feel about building. The house tells you what it needs. You just show up with tools." It was the most profound thing Sean had ever said, and Rachel suspected he did not know this, and she loved him for not knowing it. The circles happened on Thursday evenings in somebody's backyard, rotating, and they were not what Rachel expected. She had expected sharing. She had expected the particular California ritual of sitting in a ring and saying vulnerable things while someone held space, which was a phrase Rachel had always suspected meant doing nothing with conviction. What she got was Doug arguing about drainage pipes, and Janet taking notes, and a 3-year-old riding a tricycle through the middle of it, and someone's grandmother from Oaxaca knitting something enormous and orange in a lawn chair. A man who played guitar arrived late and sat down and started tuning quietly during the announcements, which was either rude or perfect, depending on how you felt about announcements. A woman who had hitchhiked from Sedona 2 weeks ago and hadn't left yet sang something under her breath that wasn't English and wasn't Spanish and might not have been a language at all. And then, around the 40-minute mark, without anyone deciding, the talking stopped. Not awkwardly, not the way conversation dies at a bad dinner party. It stopped the way rain stops. You notice it already happened. The guitar player was still playing, very quietly, something without a melody that somehow had one. The woman from Sedona had her eyes closed. The grandmother kept knitting. The 3-year-old had fallen asleep against the dog. And for maybe 2 minutes the whole circle sat in something that Rachel, who was a lawyer and therefore had a word for everything, did not have a word for. Then Doug said, "So about that bicycle tire." And the meeting continued, as if nothing had happened, which Rachel was beginning to suspect was exactly how everything important happened now. The circle dissolved the way circles do, not with a gavel, but with the natural recognition that enough had been shared for one evening, and the rest could wait. She walked home through the neighborhood in that half-light when the sun has gone but the sky hasn't noticed. The accordion player was packing up his case. He nodded at her. She nodded back. Gene was closing his table, stacking plates with the careful economy of a man who had once managed money and now managed eggs. "There's soup," he said. "I ate. There's still soup?" She took the container. Gene had made something new, walnuts and cinnamon, and Rachel didn't ask what it was. One of the elves was arguing with her hat by the laundromat. A juggler on the corner kept dropping lemons and laughing about it. Someone's grandmother was knitting something enormous and orange in a lawn chair, same as always, and a kid on a unicycle. There was apparently a kid on a unicycle now, wobbled past without anyone looking up. Doug was on his porch, doing something to a bicycle wheel. "That chain on your garage door," he said. "I sent Marco." "Which Marco?" "The one who fixes things." She had thought about the chain this morning. She had not said it out loud. "Doug..." "Janet mentioned it," he said, and went back to the wheel. Janet, who shows up and things arrange themselves. Janet, who had never been to Rachel's garage. The parrots were screaming in the eucalyptus by the Metis' house. Anvi was standing in the front yard watching them. "They're fighting about a mango," Anvi said. "How do you know?" "Eli told me. He speaks parrot." Rachel looked at her. Anvi looked back with the untroubled certainty of someone who had not yet learned what was impossible. She walked the last block home thinking about the soup, the chain, the parrots. And then she knew Eli had left his jacket at the circle, blue, under Patty Haskell's chair. She hadn't seen it. She just knew. The porch light was on. Eli was in the kitchen. "I forgot my jacket," he said. "Patty has it. Blue one, under her chair." "How'd you know which chair? How'd you know it was a mango?" Eli grinned. It was not the grin of a child who had been caught at something. It was the grin of someone who had been waiting for her to figure it out. She put the soup in the refrigerator. Through the window the chickens were settling. One of the roosters made a sound that was not quite crowing, more like a remark addressed to no one. It is what it is, she thought, and didn't need to know what she meant by it.